Today we're diving into a pretty dramatic scenario. What if the US launched a military intervention in Venezuela? Now, to really get why an event like that would be such a massive deal, we've got to peel back the layers of history, a really deep and, let's be honest, often controversial history of US involvement in Latin America. And this explainer is going to put that context right at the center of the story.
Okay, so first things first, let's break down the details of this hypothetical, but as you'll see, historically familiar military action.
So picture this. It's January 3rd, 2026. News breaks that the United States has launched an attack on Venezuela. But it doesn't stop there. They've actually captured the sitting president, Nicolás Maduro. He's reportedly in U.S. custody on his way to New York. In the world of international relations, this is nothing short of a political earthquake.
And that word unprecedented is really the one to focus on here. While the U.S. has a long history of meddling in the region, an action like this would be crossing a brand new line. According to our source material, this would be the first direct military attack on a sovereign nation in South America. Just think about that.
So, what's the official justification? Well, as imagined in our source, it comes straight from the White House. This quote from Donald Trump sets this incredibly defiant tone. It frames the whole thing not just as a move against one guy, but as a massive statement about American power in the entire hemisphere.
And that, of course, raises a huge question, one that analysts in our source material are asking, is this really some new direction for American foreign policy, or is it just a return to an old, really aggressive playbook?
To answer that, you have to go way back. I'm talking all the way back to 1823, to something called the Monroe Doctrine. Now, originally, it was all about telling European powers to stay out of the Americas. But over the centuries, it got twisted and reinterpreted to justify the U.S. intervening in its neighbor's business. Basically, it was used to claim the whole hemisphere as America's backyard. Okay, so let's fast forward to a more modern version. The source article points to a new national security strategy that it calls the Trump Corollary. Think of it as a modern update to that old doctrine, one that explicitly calls for a bigger U.S. military footprint in the region. The key thing to get here is that the ideas, the justification for an attack like this, were put in place long before any shots were fired.
And this is where historian Alan McPherson comes in with this incredibly powerful phrase, naked imperialism. That term, it's meant to be provocative, right? It suggests this isn't about some complex geopolitical chess match. No, it's about raw military power being used to get what you want. A kind of politics many people thought we'd left behind in the last century.
And this whole idea of a return to form, it isn't just a theory. It is backed up by a very long and very well-documented history of U.S. actions all across the Americas.
Just look at this timeline. It really paints a picture. From the war with Mexico in the 1840s that cost them half their territory, to occupying Cuba and Haiti, to supporting a military coup in Brazil, and of course, the 1989 invasion of Panama to grab Manuel Noriega, the big takeaway is pretty clear. It's hard to find a country in the region that hasn't felt the weight of U.S. interference at some point.
And it's also important to get that this interference kind of came in two different flavors. You have the overt military stuff. We're talking boots on the ground, invasions like in our Venezuela scenario. And then you have the covert action, the CIA helping topple governments or propping up dictators, which was a go-to move during the Cold War in places like Brazil and Chile.
Okay, but here's the million-dollar question. What happens after all this? Do these interventions actually lead to stability? Well, the historical record, at least as presented in our source, suggests a much darker outcome.
This quote right here gets straight to the point. The expert analysis is blunt. Peace, tranquility, stability, democracy, these things are almost never what follows. Instead, what's often left behind is a legacy of chaos and turmoil. And we can't forget, there is a very real, very human cost. Just take the Panama invasion, which is probably the closest parallel we have to our scenario. During that operation to capture one man, Manuel Noriega, somewhere between 200 and 500 civilians were killed. It's just a stark reminder of the collateral damage that comes with these operations.
And that brings us to maybe the most important takeaway about the long-term consequences, again from historian Alan McPherson. When an outside power comes in and forcibly removes a leader, it creates a massive power vacuum. And that, as he puts it, almost always creates long-term problems of succession. Basically, the fight over who's in charge next can tear a country apart for years, sometimes even decades. Which, of course, brings us full circle, right back to the present day in our scenario. With Maduro gone, the immediate future for Venezuela is just hanging in the balance.
So here's the lay of the land. The president's gone. The U.S. is on the record saying it plans to run the country until, and this is their phrase, a proper transition can happen. But what does that even mean? Who's going to lead it? And will it lead to that incredibly rare outcome of peace and stability? Right now, nobody has a clue. It's a total unknown.
And so we end right where we started, with this one central question. As you think about everything we've talked about, you have to ask yourself, are we seeing the beginning of a totally new chapter in American foreign policy, a shocking, bold pivot? Or are we just watching a very old script, a return to form, play out all over again? The answer to that could very well define the future of the entire hemisphere.